I'm going to teach you a little movie magic. To sync the audio with the camera, I'm going to have you clap your hand twice.
Bonjour, bienvenue de la part de l'Église française et du Saint-Esprit. My name is the Reverend Nigel Massey, and I'm the rector of the Little French Church of Saint-Esprit.
And I'm Fred.
That's great. We're all stuck inside at the moment because of the lockdown business, but just because we're stuck inside doesn't mean that we can't have some fun. So what we've decided to do is to prepare some communion bread. The recipe that we're going to follow is a recipe from St. Gregory's Abbey. St. Gregory's Abbey is a Benedictine Episcopal Abbey in Michigan, and I've chosen this for two reasons. First of all of the ingredients are easy to find, they're ready to hand, there's nothing very complicated about what we're about to do. Secondly, it's a good recipe because it won't crumble. You can eat this bread on any occasion. It's great for toast, it's good for all sorts of things. But in as far as communion is concerned, when you're up there celebrating communion at the altar and you break the bread and it all falls into 1,000 tiny bits, it's really inconvenient. Jesus is all over the place, you've got to scoop it all up and be really careful about it. But this recipe is good because the bread holds together really nicely. So as we go through the recipe, we're going to be talking not just about how to make the bread, but talking a little bit about the significance of each of the ingredients and the actual spiritual practice, if you want, about the business of making one of the oldest foodstuffs known to humanity.
Yeah, because it's also for people to make at home, right? It's not just for church.
Yes, oh yeah, it's easy to make at home, and I hope everybody does. It's a way that we can share something, it's the way that we can sort of be connected with one another, because we're all going to be tasting the same thing, hopefully. Unless it all goes disastrously wrong. Let's see how we get on. Anyway, thank you to Joris, first of all. He's our summer seminarian, and he's studying the interface, among other things, between faith and food. So, let's look at the ingredients to start off with.
Do you want to go over the 3 B's now, though, before? Or you want to go over...
Yeah, we can talk that about
I think before we do the ingredients, we should probably explain that.
Yeah, all food involves 3 B's, I think. First of all, belief.
Not B's like...
No, not the B's. We'll talk about those sorts of B's a little bit later. But the 3 B's of belief, belonging, and behaviour. All of those things relate to the way in which we both prepare food and the way in which we share food afterwards. That goes for church food as well, and communion food. So we have to believe in a recipe to follow it. So we trust the person who's made this before so that we can sort of follow the instructions, just like a recipe is a sort of Bible, I suppose. Belonging, because we all belong around the same table, we share the same food, we belong in preparing the same sort of recipes, the same sort of food, especially at certain times of year like Christmas and Easter, where we eat certain traditional foods and it makes us feel like we belong to each other. Finally, behaviour. This is a shared activity. It's something that we all do together. We're going to be kneading, we're going to be rolling, we're going to be stirring.
And even if you're on your own, you're still like belonging with the people who prepared the flour, for example, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mill the flour, is that the correct word?
Yes, mill it or grind it.
Pick up the wheat.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is something physical as well, and at a time when our physical contact with each other is compromised, to say the least, this is something that we can physically do together, you in your homes and us here.
Even through the internet, they can do it along with us.
Along with us, yeah, because we're going to record it and put it somewhere where you can go back to it time again if you'd like to. So let's think about the ingredients just for a minute.
So first, the recipe calls for a package of instant dry yeast. So we actually don't have packets. So what we have is yeast. So a packet is about 7 grams, or if you're using teaspoons, it's about 2.5 teaspoons, which we have right here. Is there any theological meaning for the yeast?
For the yeast, so there certainly is. Yeast is a really, really interesting ingredient. A little tiny bit is going to go a very long way. Jesus talks about yeast in the parable of the woman who's preparing the loaf, and she uses a tiny bit of yeast and it leavens the whole thing into something really huge. He talks about that the kingdom of God being a bit like the yeast being added to the flour and expanding and growing. It's amazing that something that looks so inert.
I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it's like so small.
Yeah, and it looks like it's not going to do anything, and yet it's going to cause something to grow 3 times bigger than it was before. Yeast is interesting too, because it's not an animal and it's not a plant. It's one of the oldest organisms around. It's sort of midway between these two zones. It's alive, and so that means it's alive. It's going to take over. But it does mean that we've got to treat it gently, just like we treat any living thing gently, but it's what's going to bring the bread alive for us. So
next the recipe called for 7/8 of warm water, 7/8 of a cup of warm water. So this is a funny dose. As a French person, you're from Britain, I'm from France. As a French person, we only cook with milliliters and grams. We don't do by volume. Do you do volume or do you do weight in the UK?
In the UK, we use the same system now as in France.
Okay, so
it's only much older people who are still stuck with the pints and things. We've never really used cups in England either. That's quite an American thing.
So 7/8 of a cup, for those who actually, you can see on the cup, usually you have both, it's exactly 200 milliliters. Now, the thing is, even though it calls for 200 milliliters of warm water, is this going to be an exact thing? You were telling me something earlier before we started shooting about the type of flour, right?
Yes, flour varies in something called a WAP, a water absorption potential. So it depends on when the wheat has been cut, where the wheat has been cut. Has it been a dry summer or a wet summer? So the flour is going to absorb different amounts of water depending on where you get it from or what sort of flour it is. Actually, some flours absorb an enormous amount of water, like a brown flour perhaps. Other flours don't absorb quite so much. So it's a very approximate thing.
Okay.
We'll talk about that when we begin to mix it, and we'll look at the sort of texture that we're looking for to make a good bread. Better to be on the wet side than the dry side.
We can just add more flour on top.
Yeah.
Well, in our recipe, we've tried it before. We can reveal this, the moving magic thing.
Yes.
It's the perfect amount. Now, is there a reason why we use warm water and not cold water?
Well, in the end, you have to be careful that the water isn't too warm, otherwise it's going to shock the flour and it will kill the yeast.
It will kill the yeast.
It's a living thing. I wouldn't like being chucked into boiling water very much either.
Like
so you've got
lobster,
to sort of try and get the happy medium. The thing is, better to be too cool. The yeast will still work because it's got something to eat. It'll just be a little sluggish, that's all. But the good thing about that is the slower it is, the nicer the flavour of the bread is going to be at the end, because it'll have plenty of time to work. If you make it rise too quickly, you're going to have a very airy bread, perhaps, but it's not going to have a very big depth of flavour because you force the yeast to work too fast and too hard.
So lukewarm, like not cold, not hot.
Yeah,
nice and lukewarm. Okay.
Patience. Yeah, you can wait. You can even leave it in the fridge overnight if you want, and it will raise.
I would stop the rate. It would stop the activation.
It would still rise, even in a fridge. So long as it wasn't frozen, the dough would still rise. Yeah.
So next, the recipe is calling for 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. Can we use any oil, or is there a reason, because it's an altar bread, that we're using olive oil?
Well, in principle, you could use any oil you want to. Almond oil would be just as biblical, I suppose. Sesame oil, if you wanted your bread to taste of sesame. All sorts of different oils are possible. Olive oil is sort of traditional, if you like. The olive oil for the recipe itself is going to do a couple of things. It will make the bread keep for longer.
Okay.
This is why baguettes have to be bought every day to be nice, because you're not going to use any oil in them, which is what makes them so delicious. So if you put olive oil in your bread, or butter, or any sort of oil like that, it's going to improve the keeping time of the bread. It will also make it less crumbly. which is why
which is what you want.
Which is what I want.
Because we can say that you probably we're doing the services online on our YouTube channel, and you will do a communion service with one person, right?
Yes,
Sunday?
that's right. Yeah, right now.
And so you will probably use this bread, right?
I think I'll be using this bread. Yeah.
So you will see it on our live stream on Sunday.
Yeah. Olive oil is like the most prized oil in the ancient world. It was used for all sorts of purposes, for anointing kings, for instance. It was used for healing, and when we say Kyrie eleison in the service, these are Greek words that means essentially pour oil onto our wounds so that we will heal, if you like.
Okay.
Also, it recalls the Mount of Olives, where Jesus prayed one of his last prayers and cried in the garden that the cup was going to pass from him. So it's full of biblical references. And it's on our spare apron.
It is. Oh, yes. So, funny story. We're just going to do a little funny story real quick. You're wearing this apron.
Yeah.
But there's another apron we wanted to wear, but we couldn't because the fabric was reverberating the light in the camera. But I still want to show it. This is... Do you want to say what it is?
No, you explain it, Fred.
It's the plants of the Bible. So see, if we were to wear this, it's going to be like reverberating all the lights, so we couldn't wear this. But what is on there? We have pomegranate, which apparently is a reference to the Song of Solomon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We have Onika?
Yeah, it's a rock rose. It sort of grows in the mountains around Jerusalem.
And gives you a little reference to Exodus. And then we have, we're not going to go all of them, but there's olives, which is Genesis chapter 8, verse 11.
Yes, the olive branch that is taken to the ark to prove that the waters have subsided when the dove. Yeah,
when they find the little...
Plenty of olives in the Bible. Yeah.
Anyway, let's go back to the recipe. Then the recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of honey. So can we choose just any type of honey? I know we do have orange blossom honey, which is one of my favorite. What would be the reason for using honey in altar bread? As a French person, usually there's no sugar in bread.
No. It does a couple of things. First of all, it's going to give the yeast a little helping hand. You can use sugar, actually, to start. We've had to use this sort of yeast that you have to reconstruct before you can put it in the bread. But instant yeast that you just put dry in the mixture will work as well. But essentially, if you put any sort of sweetness into the water, it's going to speed up the yeast a little bit and give it a helping hand to get it.
Using honey is actually with yeast. Isn't that how you make mead?
Oh yes,
I think that's how you make it. So you can also make mead if you want, apparently. I don't know how you make it.
Yes, I don't know either. Maybe we've got time on our hands.
That's going to be another recipe, how to make mead, right?
Yeah. Honey is also a great biblical ingredient. In fact, it's mentioned quite often in the Psalms, for instance, where the psalmist says, your words are like honey in my mouth. This is actually a pun. The Bible is full of these fun puns which don't translate very well into English or French, because obviously puns only work in the language that they're in. But the word for honey involves 3 letters.
In Hebrew.
In Hebrew, in all Semitic languages, your vocabulary is built up out of a series of consonants, essentially. And the consonants for honey are D, B, R. This can mean a word, for instance. It can mean an ecosystem, a field, a wilderness. And it also is the word for honey. And if your name is Deborah, this is exactly where it comes from.
Hi, Deborah.
So also it reminds us of the manna in the wilderness. Remember when the children of Israel were wandering through the wilderness and all of that? They complained that they didn't have any food, so God sent this bread-like manna, from heaven. And when they tasted it, they said, "Oh, it tastes of honey. It's a little bit like honey." So that's quite appropriate for communion bread that you've got. It's the manna from in the wilderness that we're sharing.
This is like a recipe and Bible study at the same time. That's awesome. Okay, next the recipe is calling for a pinch of salt. So the salt, what would be the biblical reference with the salt? I mean, the sea is often referenced in the Bible, but it's something dangerous.
Yes, in the beginning, in the Genesis chapter 1, it says the Spirit of God was moving over the face of these chaotic waters. And actually for the Hebrews, they were rather scared of the sea. They weren't really a seafaring people like the Phoenicians say. So for them, the sea was what was left of the primordial chaos before God created land and earth, if you want. So it's a sort of perilous ingredient, if you like, especially in bread. Too much salt will kill the yeast, actually. So if you're mixing instant yeast into your flour, put the yeast on one side and the salt on the other before you mix them together. Because if you put the yeast and the salt together and the salt hits the yeast, it's going to kill it. Yeast doesn't grow in the sea. So it's also used in baptisms to chase away the devil.
Yeah. Okay.
In the earliest Christian tradition, a pinch of salt in the baptismal water it means passing through death into life. Also, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," and if the salt loses its flavour, how can it regain its saltiness again? So bread without any salt in it is going to be utterly tasteless, to be honest. But bread with too much salt in it, you just can't eat it. It's a complete disaster.
Okay, so an interesting lesson on not using too much salt. And then the last ingredient, we're getting there, the recipe calls for 2 2/3 cup of flour. So we're going to use white flour. However, I believe in the recipe you can also replace, you can use 1 cup of white flour and 1 2/3 cup of whole wheat flour instead. Then what is the biblical reference with the flour? I guess the wheat?
Oh, there are several references to it. And one of the things I like about this particular recipe, or any recipe of bread, is that they represent all different parts of creation. You've got the sea with the salt, you've got the orchards of the olive groves, you've got the fields, meadows full of flowers where the bees are busy collecting us, as we've got the fields full of yeast. All of these things are connecting us to places which at the moment we can't go. But they've come to us. We can taste them, we can smell them. They're in our kitchens. We've gone on a journey through all of these ingredients. And there's fields of wheat in that bowl. And you can use other sorts of wheat. I wouldn't recommend stone ground, especially for a communion bread, because that's going to make it crumbly.
It seems to be something really important for you.
I'm sorry to keep going.
You don't want it crumbly.
I don't want it crumbly.
Because then it falls into the wine, right?
Yeah, and you don't want crumbly toast either if you're just making it for yourself,
yeah.
Especially if you're having a nice piece of toast in bed.
Yeah, that's true.
There's nothing worse than toast crumbs to make your life uncomfortable.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna start making it now, right?
Yeah.
And we're back. We made a little break to make sure that everything was still recording correctly, because that would be the worst, talking for an hour and then we have to re-record everything. But everything seems to be going well. Now, following the recipe, so the recipe itself has to actually mix the warm water with the honey, the olive oil, the yeast and the salt. But because the recipe is using what's called instant yeast, we are actually using active yeast, so we need to activate our yeast. So a way to do this is to actually mix the warm water with 1 of the 3 tablespoons of honey. So it activates the yeast in about less than 5 minutes. I think this water is still warm, right?
Yeah. I think so. And it'll still work.
So you want to do this?
Yeah. Well,
right.
Yes. Let's give it a go.
So I guess put a
So
tablespoon
I'm going
of
to
honey.
squeeze a little bit of this honey into the.
Want to use the spoon?
No.
No. Okay.
The yeast's going to be perfectly happy there. Just a little squirt of it will do absolutely fine. And then we just scatter the yeast on the top like this. And stir it about. There.
So it's activating when it starts foaming, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit of movie magic. We had one, but I think it's been out way too long. We can actually show it's very funny.
Oh yes.
So
look at that.
This is supposed to go up for 5 minutes. I don't know if you see it, but this is the water. This is the foam. So this is no go, right?
No, that's absolutely great. I mean, the yeast is really partying in there.
We can still use it like this?
Of course.
All right.
Yeah,
so I guess we're going to use
fine.
this.
Yeah.
We can remove this one.
Yeah.
So then once we have this, now I guess you can mix the rest of the olive oil, the rest of the honey and the olive oil.
Yeah.
And a pinch of salt.
And a pinch of salt. So we can tip those all into the yeast, because now it's perfectly happy. It's working nicely, so we can put the oil in there and the honey can go in there.
Now honey is going to take a while.
It's going to take a little while.
Why don't I just keep it up while you're doing this?
Good. And then with the salt, let's just think.
Let's see that pinch of salt.
A good pinch, because we've got how much flour? There's about...
We got 2 2/3 cups.
2 2/3 cups. So I'm using about, I would say, 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt in there. And I'm going to do this superstitiously.
Superstition.
That's where the devil
and then we can
is
just mix it like this?
Yeah, just mix it up, that's fine. But it's going to be kneaded and all of the rest of it, so it'll all mix.
I'm just thinking of the honey, so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the cup.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Alright. Next, now that we've added all our wet ingredients, we have to mix with the flour. So I got you this nice...
Oh, look at that.
Woodful.
Nice.
As a French person, I feel any mixing has to be done in a wooden bowl and with a wooden spoon.
And a wooden spoon. That's right, so we don't scroll.
So we're going to add our flour in there.
In there.
Try to put everything all over the place.
Sometimes it's a good idea to make a little well in the middle of the flour like this. Whoops. There we go. So you've got a little, I don't know, volcano crater.
We do that for crepes too, for instance.
Yeah.
And just
dip
dip it
this
in there.
into the middle. That's good. Right. Nicely mixed, so nothing's left of the thing. And you can start to draw the flour across the liquid with a wooden spoon, just to set it off. A tip, if you like, I try to use just one hand when I start to dig in there, because if the telephone rings or a catastrophe happens,
you have like flour
at least
over
you've
hands.
got one hand that is still clean.
Yeah.
So obviously you can't make bread just by stirring the flour into the...
And obviously during this time, we've both washed our hands thoroughly before starting this video.
Several times over, exactly.
So you're mixing with the flour, we're going to have that dough. So then we're going to have to knead that ball of dough.
So once you're sort of roughly combined and you're getting some idea of how wet your dough is going to turn out to be with a given amount of liquid that you've got in there, I suspect that this is going to be a little bit too dry, but what we can do is to tip it out onto our kneading surface.
Oh, we have extra water with the yeast actually, so if we need it.
And then I'm going to get into there to feel it.
Okay.
You could do this in a machine with a kneading hook, and that works just as well probably, but as we're going to discover in a minute, the kneading part can be quite a spiritual exercise.
Okay, so let's see how you do it.
So
the French
I'm going to
person
sort of combine a little bit just to feel the dough with my hand, because that's the only way to tell if it's wet enough. And I think, actually, it
takes a little bit of time to get the wetness from the inside out.
Yeah.
I think if you pick up all those pieces and put them together.
And put them together. There we go. Good. So once it's combined a little bit like this, you can now begin to, since it's not wet and sticky, I'd like it a little wetter actually, to be honest. But let's just leave it there for now.
I mean, as a French person, this is how, if I may, as a French person, kneading the bread on the table sounds wrong. As a French person, I would pick it up like this, okay? And I would just beat it up like this.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see.
This is how we make bread in France.
But you've got to combine it first, yeah?
Yeah, but I mean, you combine it with your hand, but it's true that it should be sticking right now and it's not. But what we can do is pick up some of the water from here, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
With the yeast.
Yeah.
What do I take that tablespoon
out
right
a little
here?
bit.
What, 1 tablespoon?
1 tablespoon, why not? It's amazing how quickly it goes from too dry to sopping wet, I always find. But the more you work it, the more it
it's getting wetter, I can see. Do you need more water? You have a little bit here.
I think we're getting there, yeah. If you're making something like focaccia, or one of those other sorts of bread, then you definitely need it much wetter than this, because the whole idea of something like a focaccia or one of those other breads is that it's got to be very elastic and light and floppy, whereas this communion bread is going to be a little bit more solid, clearly. At first, it feels like it's going nowhere, and the texture of it looks sort of lumpy. I don't know if you can see that. But what we're trying to make is a dough that is not going to break like that. We want something elastic and soft and smooth. And that takes about, I don't know, I would say at least 5
Be able to pick those up?
minutes. We can try.
Just so we have a clean. Let's put some more water. Do you want more water?
Yeah, just a drop. Yeah, that's good. So I tend to, I don't know why I've got an association in my mind between kneading and knuckles. They both begin with a K.
Can I actually do a little of the French way?
Sure.
Because, see, to me, what's interesting with the kneading is I feel, everyone is looking up right now how to do home workouts, right?
Yes.
And the French way is basically kind of punching. I won't pick that up. Punching the dough like this. You see? But if you start doing this for 5 minutes, it's actually a cardio exercise.
Yeah, maybe it will do something for the biceps.
Because when you do this, we're going to bring dough all over the place. We might clean that up if suddenly in the shot you see that the table is clean, you know it's been edited out. But see, in France we would probably do it more like this. We push more on the knuckle.
Yeah, and not on a table.
Definitely not on a table. I mean, maybe. I don't. Maybe I'm saying in France, but it's just in France then.
And it may be that some people in England prefer to knead like that, or America.
I mean, I like to push it out and then in.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a very physical relationship. I don't know of any other food that involves this sort of kneading and effort. And, it reminds me of the fact that anything good from life comes only with a great effort. We're trying to get it nice and elastic, We're trying to get the gluten in the flour to develop so it will not go sort of heavy and stodgy, but instead it'll be nice and light and it'll have that nice crumb inside it that's more elastic than sort of crumbly and hard.
So talking about this movie Magic, this is supposed to be done for 5 minutes. Obviously, we're not going to do this for 5 minutes. We have prepared one in advance. And so what's happening, once you've kneaded this for 5 minutes, the recipe calls to put it into a grease bowl, cover it, I'm like out of breath, and cover it and let it, what do you call this?
Let it prove, let it rise.
Prove for an hour and a half. So what would you say about that hour and a half? Can we use this for meditation?
I would say, yes, just let the yeast do the work for you. After all, you've thrown yourself into this whole thing and given it all the help that it could possibly get. So, take the time to relax and think and savor the moment.
So I think in the video, this is the time where we're going to bring up the other dough, but we're going to put a 30-second pause for people to meditate.
Yes.
And then we're going to come back with a clean table. and the dough risen.
Perfect. Great. So
we're back.
We're
back with some movie magic. The table has cleaned itself in less than 30 seconds. And we have our dough that has proofed for, I want to say 4 hours because it's taking longer than we thought to make this video. Is that bad?
No, not really. It can start to fall back on itself if you leave it too long. But look, we haven't put it in a really hot place or a proving drawer or something. No harm can really come to it. It's going to be fine.
So the recipe calls for rolling this dough about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick I think the one we did was about the 1/4 inch, and they turned out fine. So, do you mind if I do this?
No, please do. I'm hopeless
kind of like
at rolling out.
Kind of like rolling the dough.
Really frustrates me.
So what I do is I do this, and that table we just cleaned, right?
Yes, it's hyper clean. Yeah.
is now again dirty because of this. All right, so you pick up your dough.
That's such a fun thing to do, to knock it down. It feels so good, doesn't it?
And it's a bit sticky at the bottom. Good. So remember, we have put a little bit of olive oil in this.
That just stops a hard crust from forming over it, which goes nasty.
So I'll just have a little bit of flour over.
Are you going to do a very brief second kneading, or is that it?
No, I'm just going straight in.
I think because we're rolling it flat.
We're rolling it flat
need a
anyway.
Second brief kneading. Yeah. The rolling business is an equivalent.
Yeah.
To
See, I see a little bit of bubbles in there. I think there's more bubbles than I would like, but
yeah, sometimes the rolling will flatten them out.
this is so fun.
You seem to have a magic touch with the roller. Whenever I try and roll something, it always shrinks back, especially if you're trying to make a nice round pizza.
Oh, it's because you have to like. I mean, that's my technique is to not push hard. It's like you basically let the weight of it.
Let the weight of the roller do the work.
But it takes longer because you see, you also have to figure out where. See, this one is higher than this. I can tell just from looking at it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to push back some of the dough over there. So it kind of makes a nice square. I mean, you know, if it's not completely flat, whatever. We're gonna cut circles out of it anyway.
Yeah. Have we got a circle?
Am I doing it right?
Yes, it looks great to me. That's really good. It's a nice amount as well. That's perfect.
Yeah, how many are we gonna make? About 5?
I think that would probably make about 5 altogether. Yeah, we're rolling it into about, what, 1/2 centimetre?
Yeah, I mean, it says in an inch, it's about 1/4 inch, I think.
1/4 inch, yeah.
Do you want to take the rule to measure it?
No.
We could do that.
We could.
Alright, so that's about as far as I can go with it.
Yeah, that looks nice.
Now, the magic thing, because you want to cut it in circles.
Yes.
So for you to use at the communion table, you kind of want to make it about that big, right?
Yeah, that would be a good size.
So people can make it any size.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're having it at home, it doesn't have to be in circles and crosses or anything like that, but, you know.
Here's what we have.
Yeah.
We don't have a cookie cutter on the right side. No. This is a biscuit tin.
Yes.
We've done this before, so this is not completely a trial.
No.
So
it's a good size, actually. It's about the size of a communion pattern that's used on the
Can you do this?
Yeah. See?
There you go. Yeah. So it sounds right? Looks right? Yeah. All right. So we're gonna need the grease thing. I'm gonna go pick it up.
Sure.
Yes, over there. Because we're gonna cut circles. Sorry, I'm behind it.
You might be wondering why circles, why not squares, or I don't know, triangles for the Trinity, if you want. The circle is supposed to be in divine geometry. The circle is a symbol of divinity. It knows no beginning, it knows no end. Its exact size cannot be calculated. It's supposed to symbolize heaven. So the circle is then going to be imposed with essentially a square, a cross, and the cross is supposed to symbolise our earthly nature, because of the 4 winds, the 4 seasons, the 4 humours of the body, the 4 corners of the globe. All of these are physical things, and the circle is supposed to represent eternity. So in the circular communion bread with a cross on it, you've got the perfect combination, if you want, between Christ's divinity in the circle and Christ's humanity in the cross. Okay. Essentially.
So we've greased this before. So you're supposed to take a cookie sheet? How do you call this?
Yeah,
baking sheet.
A baking sheet.
Yeah. And then we put olive oil because we've been using olive oil the whole time. So I'm gonna do this and try to not mess it up. I'm gonna try to go as far on the edge as I can. And so I press, and then you turn like this to cut it. Let's see if this worked. See, when it stops sticking to the rest, yes, it's not. So now it's been cut, and look at this.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's really good.
Nice circle. I'm gonna pick it up.
Did you want a fish slice?
A fish slice? What is that?
What do you call a not a
spatula.
Like a spatula. What would you? What's the name for that thing?
Spatula.
Spatula. I don't know why I called it a fish slice.
Yeah, we kind of should get. This is gonna be movie magic. 3, 2, 1.
Magic.
Great. Now we have a spatula, which is a promotional spatula.
Yes.
But it so happened to be very cutting.
Yes, it has a nice sharp.
It has a nice sharp
end.
edge.
Yeah, you could do it with a knife, I suppose. Some people say a serrated knife is better than just a sharp, plain filleting knife or something, because it's going to cut the bread.
Actually, I prefer taking it with my hands, but I think it's very good to make the cross.
Yeah, that's going to be handy to make the cross. That was quite a discovery, that spatula for making the cross.
Yeah, see, when you pick them up with your hand, you kind of mess up the shape, but you can remake them a little bit. How many can I cut out? I'm going to try to get as much as I can, as many as I can.
Yeah.
For here, you can probably only fit 5 on that cooking sheet.
Yeah, 5 on that sheet, I think, is going to be plenty. And you need to leave a little bit of space between them so that they don't merge into one block, because they're going to rise again like Jesus in the oven.
Jesus is going to rise in the oven.
Yeah.
Could it kind of be like a stone that you roll, right? Like
it does look a little bit like the stone on the front of the
tomb.
La meule.
La meule. All right.
Le blé qui lève au creux de nos moissons. There's a wonderful Easter hymn.
We can probably put that in the background at some point. All right, I'm going to kind of shape them back into a circle. I think I'll mess them up a little bit. Thankfully, we've made some before that look better. All right, and the last one.
That's good. That's looking great. And we've got some nice leftover for
to make a bread or something?
To make a pizza. It's not too sweet actually, even though the honey is in it. It can be used for all sorts of things.
I mean, there's sugar in pizza though.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
All
right. Now this is when you make the cross. You want to make the cross. I feel like you're the priest, so you should make that
you
cross.
should be making the cross.
Well, should we switch places again?
Yeah, let's switch places.
Let's go back to our original.
There we go. So the point about this is when it goes in the oven, it's going to undergo a second rising. So you've got to be quite aggressive with it to make sure that the shape stays in the thing, even though it's going in the oven. So if you're too delicate about the cross, it's simply going to disappear in the second rising and get baked out of it.
So you want to almost touch the...
So you want to almost go all the way through to the baking sheet. This is a nice breadth, and it's got a nice sharp edge to it. So all I do is sort of press on the top of it. So you can almost feel the baking sheet underneath it, like that. Doesn't matter even if it looks like there's a hole in it. This bread is quite elastic. So it's going to cover it up. That's about where we did it, isn't it? So I think that should be fine.
What's funny is that this spatula. Why do you put the stress on spatula?
Spatula.
On this spatula is actually the perfect size for this.
Yes, it is. Isn't it? It's the marriage made.
We're lucky. All right, so the recipe calls for putting this in the oven on a greased baking sheet at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not. I think it's about 180 degrees. If I'm wrong, I'm going to write it at the bottom of the video. But it's for 10 to 12 minutes because the reason is we all have different oven. Yeah. So 350 for my oven might be different from your oven. So from my experience, it's about 12 minutes in our oven. So we're going to put this in the oven and we'll be right back with the yummy yummies.
Well, Fred,
Magic.
We did it. Magic.
We are back, and this is burning my hand, so I'm going to put it down.
That reminds me of a very nice observation of Joris, who said he'd been thinking over this, and almost when you put this in the oven, it's like Christ is going into the tomb. Yeah. And then remember when he comes out of the tomb, he meets Mary Magdalene, and then he says to her, "Do not touch me." And Joyce said that's probably because he was still too hot when he came out of the oven.
This is definitely too hot for my hands.
So here they are. Let's take them off and put them in the basket. Do you think?
Those are the ones I've made before.
Yeah, that's good.
I guess we'll just
nice. You can just
touch Jesus and burn our hands.
Flip them over like this. What you're going to notice is one side is slightly more cooked than the other side because where it's hit the baking tray, the heat on it has given it a nice burnt look.
It's
like this.
Cool. You want to get one of the cold ones?
No, this
so
is
you can
good.
show
It's
it?
absolutely fine. I got asbestos.
This one we can.
Oh, there we go.
So this one, if you want to hold it?
Yeah,
The
there we go. So you can see that this side is nice and brown. The other side is slightly more pale. But that's all right. It doesn't make any difference to the taste. And in a moment or two, we're going to break one.
Yeah, should we
taste it?
I want to taste the hot one.
A nice hot one, yeah.
Yeah.
Fish a nice hot one out.
Well, you say your hands don't feel heat? You've been
Not
touching
so much,
this
not
so
so
much,
much,
that's what it is.
that's
Why go? Let's see if you can break it without burning your hands.
There we go.
Oh, this is like a nice break.
Nice break. You see, it's not crumbling or anything. It's holding nice and thingy. So I can break it along the lines of the cross, which is nice and convenient when it comes to dispensing them for communion. And then each bit I can break off in a small way when the time comes.
So I guess we can just pick up a piece and just blow on it.
Yes, and don't blow near me.
Yes, you can do that. So let's see what it tastes like. Can you taste the honey?
Yeah, that's really good. It's a great texture. It doesn't open up in the middle like a pita bread, which is really good. It's nice.
It feels almost like
Yeah.
like a very flavorful pizza dough. Like you don't even need tomato on top.
Yeah, it's delicious and not too salty and
It's
not
sweet.
too sweet. Yeah.
It is a bit sweet, but
Oh, it's sweet.
you can taste the orange blossom from the honey we used.
That's a nice thought.
I guess that's my meal.
You can make it at home. Even if you live alone, you're part of what we're all sharing. That's important. Or you can share it with family and make it a project to do all together. I know we can't meet in person just at the moment. This is just one way of reaching out. And finished with, first of all, thanks so much, Fred,
Well,
for
thank you.
all of this hard work setting everything up. You won't believe what this looks like the other side of the camera. Perhaps, Fred, you could
It's a
take
mess.
a couple of pictures and put them on Instagram or somewhere so that you can see.
What you guys don't see is that we have 4 whiteboards in the background with like a lot of notes. Probably saw us looking left and right. There's my chair with a microphone on top of it. Other microphones all over the place. It looks like a very last minute movie studio.
Well, you would know, Fred.
Yeah. All right.
Good. Well, shall I read for us a little something? This is a hymn that we normally sing at Easter. I'm going to read it out because it talks about the bread, about the stone being rolled away from the tomb, and I thought it would be a good way for us to finish our bready meditation.
And I'll eat more.
The words are actually written by Louis Aragon, who was the French poet. Le blé qui lève au creux de nos sillons et porte en lui le poids de nos moissons est lourde aussi d'espoir pour d'autres dents. Le blé broyé, moulu comme un martyr, deviendra pain. Rompu, il peut nourrir. Il a passé l'épi pour s'accomplir. Le blé du Christ semé au Golgotha, il mûrira, sera broyé en croix et deviendra le pain d'Eucharistie. Le Christ en nous qui lutte et souffre encore n'a pas fini de traverser la mort, mais nous attend vainqueur sur l'autre bord. L'amour du Christ comme un levain nouveau a fait rouler la meule du tombeau et déferler sur nous l'esprit et l'eau. À prix d'amour, le ciel nous est offert. Un Père enfin nous tend les bras ouverts. Et la mort absurde est morte et clôt l'enfer.
Interesting, they're talking about the la meule in front of the tomb. La meule, because for those who don't speak French, is actually the mill. Like
Yes,
la meule is like
millstone.
is the millstone.
Yeah, the grindstone.
And it's talking about the meule, so the millstone in front of the tomb.
Yes.
Which I thought was very, very interesting when we're talking about the shape of the thing,
Yes.
like a millstone.
Yes, it's the bread is like a millstone too.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who has been watching this, and I think you have some closing words.
I think I did it in this thing.
Oh, I thought that was it.
You know, we could do that as well. This is from a very, very early Christian text from the 1st century called the Didache. As broken bread was once scattered on the mountains, and after it had been brought together became one, so may your church be gathered together from the ends of the earth into the kingdom. Until we meet in person, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the bread.
Thank you.